This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your source for the latest Iowa ag news headlines right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, Mark Magnuson, and Andy Peterson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Riley.
Good day and welcome to Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Riley Smith. Today is Friday, January 17th of 2025, and we are so glad you can join us for today's show. In today's episode, we have another report from Andy Peterson as he talked with Will Griffin of Valent about what to expect as we get closer to planting season, especially on the corn side of things. We'll also, as always, have our closing market analysis today with Sam Trainor of agmarket.net. But first off, Andy, go ahead and take it away and give us that conversation with Will.
It's been kind of cold here this winter, and yet 90 days from now, the planters will be starting to roll. It will be here before we know it. Will Griffin is the row crop segment manager with our friends at Valent Herbicides. And let's focus here on what we should be thinking about corn. Weed control, perhaps, in my opinion, in the priority list of concerns. Is very, very high, Will, because modes of action don't just grow on trees, new ones at least, and it seems like the weeds continue to get smarter.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons here recently. Well, first of all, appreciate the time, Andy. It's to your point. I lived in South Dakota for about 7.5, 8 years, and just recently moved back home to Mississippi. So we're a little closer than 90 days probably from putting some beans and corn in the ground, but we actually got snow last weekend, which was really a shock to the system for some of my brethren that are residents in Mississippi. But yeah, it's definitely, as we look at the corn herbicide mixes that are on the markets now and what's been out for many years and then what's to come, there's a lot of different products, and there's a lot of really good products. But at the end of the day, the easiest way to manage weed resistance is to have multiple modes of action when you're spraying for a pre-emerge. Here at Valent, this will be our third season, coming into our third season with our new corn herbicide Maverick. It has 3 modes of action. It can be used pre and post. So it's been a really good fit in the market space. We've seen significant growth year over year, and it's getting some traction. It's a low use rate, so we have a lot of flexibility, not just on timing but on rate. So we're really excited about what that product does. But as we were talking earlier, pre-emerge is one of those things that the investment that producers make in corn is extremely high from a seed perspective. And then you layer on top of that the fertilizer work that's done either in the fall or prior to work. Last thing you want to do is have a weed using up the fertilizer that you put in that field and have that seed that's really expensive fighting for that nutrient that's out there with a weed. So as we go into the season, I really encourage folks to slow down, make the proper preparations and make sure that they're getting a strong pre-emerge out there to help fight those weeds off and ensure a solid stand on their corn.
Yeah, to your point, coming off of the most expensive crop that has ever been planted, off a little bit this year. Obviously, the market rally here recently, the past few days, has been easing some economic concerns, but crop protection is very, very high on the list. What is it about weeds that makes them hard to control, I guess, or continues to at least seemingly make that battle feel like it's uphill?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is obviously there's a lot of older chemistry out there that has gotten used as a straight AI. So we didn't have that multiple modes working in that field to make sure that we were able to control those weed species when we had an escape from one mode of action. We didn't have something killing it, and so then you you increase the opportunity for resistance to continue to increase. And then, as we think about pre-emerge and even early post-emerge weed control, making sure that you get something out there that has residual that lasts is really important, because a lot of times, these seed can carry from year to year to year for multiple years, 20, 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years sometimes, if you listen to some folks around some of the seed that's out there, but from a weed perspective. But, anytime you have weeds in a field and those weeds go to seed, then you're going to have that same trouble next year. And really, the only way to help manage that in a field is through proper production practices, whether it's how you're managing your tillage, proper crop rotation, obviously the proper herbicide use, making sure that you're killing the weeds that are there. And if you can put something down with the residual that prevents them from coming up, especially as the corn begins to dry down and start getting some sunlight through that canopy, and all of a sudden you've got a flush of weeds that maybe you didn't think you had, and you go out there and you combine, and all of a sudden at harvest you're going through a field that had a little more weed pressure in it than you thought. And if that weed that's out there goes to seed, guess what we're going to have next year? And that's kind of how and Iowa's a little different, just based on the seasons. But if we have a really long warm fall, those are things that can really help drive some of that additional weed pressure that we see annually.
Yeah, the late season water hemp in corn, if you notice that when you're combining, should be particularly concerning. If it's corn next year, particularly if it's going to be soybeans, and we'll talk about that here at a later time. Will, how can we find out more about Valent herbicide?
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can go to our website, valent.com, and you can search your specific crop, or you can search the specific product that you're looking for, and on there is a link to your local rep as well. And if you have any questions, you can leave a question, and it'll get funneled to the appropriate person. So appreciate the opportunity, and please feel free to check us out on the web anytime you got sitting around the shop getting ready for the season.
Will Griffin with us from Valent Herbicide here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Thanks again to Andy Peterson for providing us that conversation with Will Griffin of Valent. We'll go ahead and take a quick break, and then we will be going to the closing markets right after this word from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
Welcome back to Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and it's time now to take a look at the closing markets with Sam Trainor of agmarket.net. First off, Sam, on this Friday, what do we see going on in the grains?
We saw some strength today after a few days of selling off. The markets recovered into the weekend here. March corn was up 10 cents. March beans up 16 cents. So nice strong bounce into the weekend here. We had some news out of the overnight with China's president and President-elect Trump having a conversation, showing their intentions towards each other, that they want to create strong trade relationships going forward. Despite some of the tariff negotiations that have been going on, they both look forward to maintaining a good relationship under the new term. So that was seen as friendly to the markets today, and soybean prices certainly acted as such.
And as a whole, heading into this new administration, and I suppose in general, we usually see a little bit of volatility into the markets with a big change like that. But heading into this administration, as a whole, are we looking at generally positive or negative either way of just how the markets are kind of bracing themselves?
Yeah, I think that's the question everybody's looking to have answered. I know a lot of people here leading into the election in November, a lot of people were worried that a Trump victory would mean that we would be going lower here as we move forward, but that has certainly not been the case here as we get going. We had a strong rally into the following that election result. And then that's kind of been the case for corn here. If you look back to November till now, we've been fairly strong. So look for that to remain the case here going forward.
And then, of course, following the WASDE report for January, expecting to see changes to South America, didn't end up seeing those. We're pretty well past that report now, getting closer to the February report where we might see some changes to the South American crop. Obviously, the grain markets are wanting to see those changes, and I think it's generally right now looking like we could potentially see those.
Yeah, South America has kind of been a tale of two stories. You look at Brazil, they've been getting the rain and staying on trend with what they're looking for. Most analysts are expecting Brazil to have a very good crop, whereas Argentina's been on the drier side of things, not catching the rains that their northern partners have been, and they're getting a little bit drier here. Did have some forecast middle of this week for some rain over the weekend, and that's why we saw the sell-off here on Wednesday and Thursday. But today, like I said earlier, those China trade talks help things higher, and I guess we'll just have to see what happens over the weekend, whether or not we get that rain in Argentina, because that could bring things back down a little bit lower. But as you mentioned with that report on a week ago, didn't see much changes out of the South American crop, but I think we're still trading some of those big changes that we saw with the U.S. crop. Still hard to believe that we lost over 500 million bushels here in just a matter of about 3 months. You look back during harvest time frame, we were looking at having over 2 billion bushel carryout, and now we're, after last Friday's report, we're at 1.54 carryout on corn. So that's been the trend here to keep things higher, and look for that to remain the same going forward.
And then moving on to the livestock marketplace, obviously the grains bounced back a bit today. How did cattle and hogs trade?
Cattle and hogs were a little mixed today. Definitely had a brutal day in those markets yesterday, down sharply. Not as bad today, although it was a little weaker. The fat cattle markets were down marginally. Feeders were up just a bit, but not by much. And the hogs were down sharply today. The hogs took the biggest hit today on the livestock side of things.
And then, of course, as we look into that marketplace, generally at this time of year, what do we expect to see from both the cattle and hog markets?
Seasonally, this is the time of year when things are getting a little tight for these cattle producers, but that's certainly not been the case this year. I mean, we're up against all-time highs in the feeder and fat cattle markets, and the story remains that the cattle just aren't out there. Very tight supplies right now, and people are paying up for the meat. So I mean, you go to the grocery store and you see the higher beef prices. That's a direct reflection of these commodity markets where these cattle prices are at all-time highs.
Then, of course, we always look for those seasonal demand periods as well. And this time of year is really a dry spell for that seasonal demand, especially with holidays.
Yeah, you're right. We get into this time of the year. Generally, we're trying to ship out some soybeans, and we've been doing a little bit of that, but like to see a little bit more. I think as you mentioned here with South America and their crop, if things were to go south there, that's going to facilitate a lot more buying out of the U.S. and maybe not so much on the export side of things, but you got to look domestically here on the soybean side with all of our crush plants. We're going to need to continue to feed those. We saw a NOPA crush report out earlier this week, over 200 million bushels being crushed. So that continues to be a strong market for these soybeans here domestically.
All right, Sam, lots of great information today. For anyone who would like to get in touch with agmarket.net, how can they do that?
Yeah, best way would be to visit our website at agmarket.net or give us a call here in Normal at 1-800-779-1515.
All right, Sam, thanks again for the analysis as always, and we look forward to talking again soon.
All right, very good. Thank you.
That again was Sam Trainor of agmarket.net. We'll take a look at how the numbers close through the market window at iowaagnet.com. March corn up 9 3/4 at 484 1/4. March soybeans up 15 even at 1034 even. March soybean meal up 280 at 297.20. Soybean oil up 66 cents at 45.69. Chicago wheat up 1 1/4 at 538 3/4. Minneapolis spring wheat up 2 1/4 at 583 3/4. Kansas City hard red wheat up 1/4 cent at 548 1/2. March oats up 12 3/4 at 362 1/2. On the Merc, February live cattle up 15 cents at 196.75. March feeders up 32 at 268.05. February lean hogs down $1.17 at 81.12. Pork cutout went unchanged at 91.32. And February class 3 milk up 11 cents at 20.17. And that's been a check of the markets here on Ag Matters PM. That also brings us to the end of today's episode. You can find all of our content on our website at iowaagnet.com. Also, follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn, and find our video content as well as previous episodes of AM/PM on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to see when those videos go live. As always, check out our free morning, midday, and closing market podcasts, as well as the Iowa Ag Matters podcast and Pods of Potential. Find those on our website, again at iowaagnet.com, or on your favorite podcasting service at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Podbean. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Riley Smith. On behalf of Mark Magnuson, Andy Peterson, and Dustin Huffman, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.